Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I have a really fascinating young lady to introduce you tonight. Marie Kops is her name. She's from Czechoslovakia. She's immigrated to Canada, and she's a fashion designer, and she holds a big event called Fashion Shoot Extravaganza, which I became aware of and wanted to check in with her to find out what it's all about. Marie, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, tell us to start with a little bit about what Fashion Shoot Extravaganza is.
Actually, the event already was in 2019, but it was a pilot project of mine that stems, from editorial shoots. I am a fashion designer and I am obsessed with editorial shoots. I love the idea of all these artists coming together and cooking, their talents all together and bringing together the best possible outcome in terms of editorial fashion story, which may end up in magazines like Vogue, Elle, you name it. And because I was so fascinated by this, I thought, you know what, why not make this as a live show for live audience? So the audience is it's going to be present as we shoot, and they can appreciate how much work actually it is to put together fashion shoots. So I did this shoot in 2019 before the pandemic, and we had 4 different editorial shoots changing as we were moving through the event.
Yep.
And it was quite popular. Like, people liked it. And what fascinated me the most was people were still asking me a year and a half later, when is the next one? This was so great. I've never seen anything like that. So I was really pleased to see people enjoying it.
It really was quite an extravagant event with unbelievable fashions.
Yeah, I had an extraordinary team. I handpicked all these people. I think we had close to 100 people on set, moving huge 12-feet pillars around. It was heavy as hell. And we were all doing this live. So we did a little bit of rehearsal, but it was kind of very tight. We had only 20 minutes late, and we were only 20 minutes late, but everything turned out really as I planned. So I was pleased.
Are you going to do it again?
Well, yes, maybe. It's in the making. Something on my mind for sure.
Now tell me, your fashion is what, accessories and vintage clothing? Is that correct?
Well, fashion for me is, I am not a typical fashion designer. I have a lot of reservations against the fashion industry. I don't believe, first of all, at these seasons, fall, winter, spring, summer. I just don't think, next season rolls in and I have to, throw this away and buy something new. So that is fundamentally, wrong, in my opinion. And also fast fashion, which is part of the fashion industry, it's a huge polluter. So for me, fashion is more like art. I create my fashion for certain projects. I rent my pieces for competitions or movies. And I never wanted to be another brand producing, something
right, just
to be on the market. It's just fundamentally it does not resonate with me. And I just cannot go there. I have so many reservations, and I'm a strong advocate, against the fast fashion industry. So I can throw some numbers,
No, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that a little later, but I just wanted to get an overview. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with Marie Kops, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her very compelling story, because she was born in Czechoslovakia and grew up there, and emigrated to Canada. And she's got really quite an interesting, compelling story in that regard. She's done some painting. She's done fashion courses in New York, and she's run events as well as now in the business. And so we're going to cover all that in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. The topic tonight is fashion and extravagant fashion. And our guest is Marie Kops. She's a Canadian fashion designer, an accessory designer, a event organizer and producer, a photographer, just an amazing young lady. But Marie, I want to switch now, if I could, to your story of immigrating to Canada, because I think it's a pretty compelling story that you've shared with me. So you grew up in Czechoslovakia, is that correct?
Yes, I did, in the 80s.
In the Czech portion,
in the good old
Slovakian,
80s.
the Czech portion or the Slovakian portion?
Czech Republic, actually, the Czech.
The Czech. And what?
Not the Slovakia.
What brought you to Canada?
Well, I was basically always interested in craft, fashion, and arts. My parents advised me at the grade 8 to go study fashion. But the problem was we just finished building a house after 3 years. And I'm a little bit of a lone wolf. So I finally had my own room. So I'm like, no way I'm going now to some dorm and sharing my room with like 5 different people. I'm staying at home and I'll sacrifice this. And I will just basically take a bus to nearby town, and I'm going to look into something like maybe bookkeeping. And so I did. I studied like bookkeeping for 4 years, and I ended up working in a bank. So during that time, I was still sewing and knitting and stuff like that. And then we started to see, because it was the revolution in 98.
Okay,
so
hold on. We'll come back. We'll come back to the revolution. Let's come back to, I understand you started sewing when you were 10 years old.
Yeah. My mother and my grandma taught me, all these things. So I basically started to experiment with textile and stuff like that, which also ended up being a problem, among my schoolmates, because one of the girls did not like me kind of be original and talked the whole school against me. So I ended up being kind of like excluded for a few weeks. So that ended up like in a huge trauma, which I was dealing actually with it in Canada. So I finally resolved
dealing
that
with Canada
like 3 years ago.
Long thereafter, really. And so it was for several weeks that no one talked to you.
No. She was a very kind of jealous person at that time. I assume, like, of course, when you're a child, you have no idea what's going on. But then as you grow and as an adult and then you start understanding life and other people's stories, you kind of put this together. And then I finally realized, hey, this really was a traumatizing, situation. And sometimes I remember I just wanted to feel invisible. I didn't want to wear anything, flashy.
You like, here wearing this gorgeous, headpiece and clothing, wanted to feel invisible. I don't believe it. Really?
Yeah. It was really like, I was like tucking away, in men's clothing, for a while and just like didn't want to really be seen by anybody, because I'm like, hey, if you wear something really like extravagant, people will not like you. So we learn as early age that people can signal us like some real bad things, and then our subconsciousness soaks this in, and then we end up being traumatized for the rest of our lives unless we address it.
So you said in what you wrote to me that when we go through these things at such a young age, we learn that it is not safe to be ourselves. It leaves a huge scar on us. Obviously, that very hurtful event had a traumatic impact on you. How did you get over it? How did you deal with it?
Well, I think depression, then it's the first kind of sign, when you start being depressed and you start questioning yourself, it impacts your self-worth, self-value. So all these actually traumatic, experiences can be detrimental to you later on in life, because you don't know what's really happening to you, because your subconsciousness is driving your life forward. And then you make wrong choices, or you do something that you think, it's right for you, but the fear in you, it's still the driving force, unless you recognize that, with a therapist, who sits down with you, and then you start peeling the onion off, and then there is one layer, another one.
Did you go through that therapy?
Yes, I did. And it took me a year and a half to go, through all that. I had some other, trauma from my childhood. And as a result, I can advise, everybody to not hesitate, because we as adults then mask the pain. We start, abusing, certain substances, and we just don't want to go there because it's so painful. But I think it's the biggest break, in our life, that child trauma can actually hinder your full potential in life. So I believe, that whatever is there, you should be brave enough to go there, address it, heal it, and then move on with your life. Because I can see in my own life how really bad and detrimental it was that I had that wound, still, or that pain, carrying it around with me.
I'm going to read for everyone a paragraph of what you wrote to me, because I think it's very impactful. At that time, I didn't know that fashion would be an area that I would dive into later in my life. I think my mom planted a seed with all the original creations she was making for me and my sister back in my childhood. I now understand the profound feelings when you wear original clothing. It is one of the most interesting experiences one can have. I was always a person who wanted to do things my own way, walking my own path. So being able to wear something nobody else in the whole world has is a very liberating feeling. But to be clear, the way I dress now when I go to events is something I started only 3 years ago. It was in the making for at least 10 years, but I had to clear some of the blocks from that early childhood trauma, and I had to go through a very painful personal transformation. So now in my 50s, I'm able to finally be myself, and I'm okay with the fact that some people will not like it again. I learned the hard way that has nothing to do with me. You went through quite the transformation. If this childhood experience stuck with you that long, and then it took 10 years of a process, and only in the last 3 years have you been able to come out dressed the way you want to dress. Mm-hmm. That's really quite incredible.
I hope I'll live a long life so I can enjoy the other half of my life being dressed.
Have you ever reached out to that young girl? And
well, I'll tell you this, Brian. It was funny because I was traveling between Canada and Czech Republic, and I started to do fashion projects in Czech Republic. I was dressing a very prominent Miss Pageant Beauty competitions, which they were aired on TV. So everybody at that time, would hear my name. And my name, when you say Marie Kops in Czech, that kind of sticks with people. And then I was in magazines and TV shows and radio shows. So I would become, like a little bit recognized there. And I remember we were visiting my parents' town with my daughter. At that time, she was maybe like 7 or something like that. And I walked into a bakery. And I remember I was dressed up like very casually, had my sunglasses and my dad's racing hat. Okay, so I was pretty like covered. And the girl stood up next to me in line. She was in fact, being served. So I was behind her. And she turned her cheek to me and said hi to me and said Marushka, which is in Czech, like Czech name Marie. And I was like, oh, now you're my friend again, because I am now being kind of like known, So you sometimes have to laugh, what life brings to you in terms of these kind of circumstances. So I said, hi, and we didn't really talk. But that was an interesting story, that she would kind of like, oh, hey, we know each other, right? Like we are friends, right?
So you never shared with her the trauma that she created?
Well, I did not. No. I don't think, it's necessary. And also, Brian, the interesting part, was that when I came to Canada, I could not speak Czech, or I actually even talked to myself, in English, because the Czech language, was so triggering, because I would hear some of the words, that they would bring, some of the old memories and stuff like that. So believe it or not, English became a huge integral part, of my healing, because the second language kind of detached me emotionally from my trauma. So I completely loved, English, from the very beginning, and English was a key element, in my healing.
Really?
Just love that language. Yeah.
So unlike a lot of people who have a real problem in emigrating to a new country, learning the language, for you, it was liberating.
Absolutely. The first time I could put a sentence together, and then as I was becoming, better and better, and then I could write, finally, and record, like even till this day, when I need to talk to myself, I just go, with English. I cannot go with Czech.
And then you took some fashion courses at George Brown College and some photography at New York Institute of Photography. Tell me what some of that education did for you.
Well, I am self-taught, right? Because I was back in the 80s or the 90s, I was studying the bookkeeping. So that didn't equip me with any knowledge in fashion. So when I started to do some fashion pieces and stuff like that, I ran into a lot of trouble. And because it's a lot of engineering, it's like pattern making and execution, sewing and stuff like that. So I'm like such a like ferocious, student. I just love to learn all these things. So I was like signing myself up, for this and that course. I think I did like in 2 years, like 25 different courses or 25 different, educational pieces. So I could put it together and finally apply that in my craft, because it's a lot of knowledge you need to have in this industry.
What a fascinating experience you've had. And then you went on to something called, was it called the White Cashmere?
Yes. Oh, that was a beautiful story. I remember in 2007, I worked for this Miss Pageant Beauty in Czech Republic. And I, at that time, was doing very Rococo style, like the 18th century gowns. And I remember with my daughter, we were walking by the Bay department store, and that corner window was all filled with all these beautiful gowns made out of cashmere bathroom tissue. And I remember standing there and I told my daughter, I was like, Lauren, I wish I could be part of that show one day. That would be so phenomenal. And that was 2007. I wasn't even a Canadian, citizen yet at that time. Really? I was just a permanent resident. Yeah. So it's just when you look back and you connect all the dots, I'm like, oh, now, you have to go through all this. And so I became a Canadian and da-di-da-di-da. And then one time I remember opening an email in 2018, and they were asking me if I could participate in this competition. And I literally broke into tears because this was really my dream. So I immediately replied, I was like, yes, I would love to. But the problem was that you never know, what the paper or the tissue can do, what you can do with that. So It took me 3 weeks to kind of tackle, to whip it into some shape, work it, somehow. And then 500 hours to put together the gown.
500 hours, that's incredible.
500, yeah, that was like intense 3 months of work. And at that time, I think I had like 2 meltdowns. Like it was really not doing what I needed it to do. But I pulled it off, and it was a phenomenal experience, and truly like a dream come true. So one of the Canadian.
So tell me, Marie, was the cashmere event an important stage in your career? Is that what made your name?
Well, I am not sure. I think it's just all accumulates. It's just as you go and you kind of achieve, these milestones. I think it's a pretty important one. And I think, maybe some people start noticing you more, or they start seeing your name at certain places. So I cannot say, for sure. I think the fashion shoot extravaganza was more prominent.
Well, this fashion shoot extravaganza really looks unbelievably impressive. And so we're going to take a break for some messages and then come back in just 2 minutes with Marie Kops and talk a little bit more about this fashion shoot extravaganza, which was really extravagant, just unbelievable. The pictures that are online of this show, the beauty, the glamour, the elegance of the shoot is just incredible. Stay with us, everyone. We're back in 2 minutes with Marie Kops. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking tonight about fashion, and really quite a compelling story of Marie Kops immigrating to Canada from the Czech Republic, from Czechoslovakia, after what seems like an incredible traumatic experience when she was a child, trying to be unique, trying to be different, using fashion as the way that she would dress herself and be unique, and was ridiculed for that. And the whole school didn't talk to her. The whole school?
The class.
Oh, the whole class.
Oh my gosh. If it was a school, that would be probably, terrible. But that was a class. Still,
the
30,
whole class
30 kids. That's pretty bad.
For weeks, you said. And then it took a long time and 10 years of work for you to get over that. And you said in what you wrote to me in your 50s, you finally, after 10 years of work, decided that you could go out in public, dressed the way, the original way, the creative way that you wanted to be dressed. And then you became known as a very successful fashion designer, and you went back to the Czech Republic, and you were involved in beauty pageants and other things, and you became famous as a designer both in Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, and in Canada. So that's an incredible story. And then you put on these events in 2019 called the Fashion Extravaganza, and the pictures are just incredible. Tell me a little bit, like that's the most ornate gowns I've ever seen. Tell me a little bit about the event, why you held it, where it was, what you did. You were a photographer as well as the producer. What were you trying to achieve?
Well, as I said, I totally love all these different areas that come together when you do a fashion shoot. Makeup artists, stylists, photographers, hairstylists. All these people have incredible talents. And when you put them all together in one room and you give them kind of like a mood board, you want something very specific from them, then they put together an amazing outcome, basically. And I was thinking, there is this thing, in the industry where the fashion photographer gets the biggest credit. He gets the biggest, very fat, name always underneath those fashion stories. When you open the Vogue, so all these guys, have the big name there, and those guys who are actually creating it for them, they're somewhere in the back. Right. And I'm like, this is so unfair. All these people put together, all their talents and abilities and years of, perfecting their crafts and everything. And then they don't get, enough credit. So I wanted basically these unsung heroes, they call them, here in English. I want them all to be also addressed, properly. So I want to give them the stage. So what we did is we did it in a little bit of a fake way, of course, because you cannot do it like, really in real time. That the makeup takes like 3 hours, with the hair. But we did like kind of like hair.
The makeup is unbelievable.
Yeah, that was the last chapter, kind of like a burlesque, slash, fetish. So the whole event was kind of like 4 theatrical stories, and it started with the girl who was celebrating, her birthday. She had some cupcakes and all these cherry blossom trees, and it was kind of like a fun. And then it entered into, she became a bride. Then she was married in this high society where she was kind of like, entering, these secret society kind of like parties. And then it kind of spilled into a little bit of like a bad girl, where she was exploring, a little bit maybe her darkest, corners. So, we brought a little bit of entertainment. It wasn't just like random, okay, let's shoot this or that. It kind of was a story of a girl who was young. And we had like a balloon. We had like a pink balloon first time. Then we had a red balloon. She popped it. And when she got married, and then we had a black balloon. So there was kind of like this red thread, throughout all this theatrical, performance. And we had like people putting this together, in a very, very like unique way, because they understood the concept, that they understood, that we are blending together beautiful props with beautiful, extravagant fashion, amazing photography, kind of like performing. And then we have all the hair and all the makeup and people assisting, the photo shoot. And they would be like spraying the hair and fixing this and fixing that, like what normally happens on set, basically. So I was preparing this for like a year and a half, believe it or not. It was not something you can whip up in 6 months. It took a lot of like details and looking into the production, how this can be stitched together. And you cannot really pause anything. Like you have like 400 people, 450 in the house sitting there on their seats and awaiting, the next move. So we had to be pretty fast and flawless and very, very assured, of what we are doing. It wasn't something, we could rehearse, for like sometimes, Broadway, would do for months and then they throw, the opening night. We were just going, like basically that night we did a little bit of a, testing during the day, and then bam, 8 o'clock, started and shows on, and we pulled it off. So it was a little bit of a miracle, I must say. And nothing really broke, nothing really went wrong. So music was absolutely fabulous. And I had people who passionately work on this project, and they delivered, like, beyond my expectations, like really great job.
The attendees really put on the fashion as well.
Yeah, I invited, some of the drag queens, because I have a thing, for drag kind of, performers. So I was really happy that we had them there. And it's just like, it was one of a kind show, like really, I think, for the books, like that's what people were saying. It's so, not, what
you said that she had this dark stage. What was that all about?
Well, it's kind of like, what I wanted to do is, like, life is all about, when you're a child, you're kind of innocent, right? So that was the first chapter, where she's like, pink cupcakes and, cherry blossom and this and pink balloon. Then she kind of starts to be an adult woman, and she wants to be married. So she finds the guy, then she gets married, and then she kind of is married into, let's say, wealth. So she's now meeting, all these people who are bored as hell, and they're throwing all these parties, and they're doing, not cool stuff sometimes, right? Like, not for me to judge, but, like, you see what can happen, right? Like behind, closed doors. And then she kind of was leaving with two guys. So it started to be a little bit dark, and a little bit kind of like, oh, where is this going? And then we had these kind of like burlesque fetish performers, coming in. And so we were kind of like just taking, the people, see, like, she's still here, like laying there, as a new bride, she's kind of like, I'm now married, and, everything good, in life. Maybe, maybe she didn't marry, the right guy. Maybe he was, maybe he was doing something, you know what I mean? Like, this is all just psychology. I totally love psychology. I actually wanted to study psychology in Czech Republic, but I didn't do the test, correctly in my almost like 28. So that's why I ended up in Canada, because I wanted to study English, as plan B. So basically, everything in psychology, we maybe underestimate sometimes how much we are driven by our, emotions, or our mind, and maybe sometimes associating ourselves, with the wrong people can lead us to a darker path. So I was just like playing, this kind of from light to dark. And everybody, because we are on a different journey, spiritual journey, everybody kind of feels this differently, right? Like, somebody will resonate with that, somebody doesn't. So I just wanted to explore, how we can push it a little bit.
Was it a big success?
Well, yeah, I heard that people did not expect this. Like, when they saw the girl, like walking in a nice fluffy dress with a pink balloon, they kind of like, oh, what is this? And then, you know what I mean? Like, and then you see the black balloon at the end, like, I think they had to wait, like, really throughout the whole show to put this together. And then they were like, wow, what was this? Like, I had like an older lady in her 60s saying, I came with two of my buddies, and we always go to these kind of like shows together, and then we need to go always somewhere else, like to get like some glass of wine, and we still want to, like, we are not like satisfied yet. And she said, Marie, we didn't have to go anywhere. We were this was so good. Like, we didn't want to spoil it. Like, this was so good. And Brian, I was hearing that, year and a half, after that show. So it was phenomenal.
Well, you should do it again.
Probably.
Now, one of the things that you told me is a current issue for you is fast fashion. And fashion shoot extravaganza almost looks like it was in the 18th century, and the epitome of very, very slow fashion, unbelievably intricate, gowns and headdresses and makeup and things like this. What's your axe against fast fashion today?
Well, look, fast fashion, I don't think, it's accidental, that the fast, in front of fashion, word, has its place there, because it just really goes too fast. It's just, they whip up, the production, like the billions of garments, every year. And now imagine 30% of it doesn't get sold.
Yeah.
3 out of 5 fast fashion items end up in landfill.
Really?
1 out of 3 young women, in particular in North America, thinks that their garment worn once or twice is old. We throw 81 pounds a year on average. It's just like, it is the fastest growing, polluting, industry in the world. And we are going to be facing such crisis 10, 15 years from now. It might be irreversible, because the dyes, from the industry, the polyester, which you need, billions and billions of gallons, of oil, water, for your average cotton shirt, just like hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water. So we don't actually think of that, when you purchase something for $5, $10, $15 and you're like, oh, this is a good deal. Yeah, behind that good deal, it's actually a lot of damage. People not paid properly, environmental costs, and stuff like that. So that is something, very alarming.
But
and as
people,
you said,
people seem to like the, and I heard someone in the fashion industry say that they were buying some of this fast fashion clothing that you could buy online and have shipped to your house just so they could take Instagram pictures of themselves in several different outfits.
That's the problem, that social media frenzy put us into such a spiral of, well, if I take a picture in this outfit, I cannot take it anymore. This is such a nonsensical, thinking. This is not sustainable. We cannot go forever in this fashion, in this manner, because this will cost us down the road tremendously. So what I love, now seeing on social media is those thrifters. These are phenomenal young ladies, or even older ladies, mature ladies, where they go thrifting and they put together, something which was already worn, they repair it, they do a little bit of alteration, and then they wear these pieces, which they normally, some other people would never touch. So I think, I kind of started liking, this concept, where you wear something already, already older, or you just repeat your fashion. There's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I keep going into a bunch of these vintage shops because I'm looking for 2 things. I'm looking for some tails, and I don't think anyone makes current tails anymore. You can get a tuxedo, but to get black tails is not easy. And then the other thing is I want a velvet red smoking jacket. And no one would produce a smoking jacket today, but those old beautiful velvet red smoking jackets. So I agree with you. I think there's something about vintage shopping that is really quite exciting to see if you can find something that's old and make it loved again.
I just really believe that we cannot continue, in this manner. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for us mentally, and it's not healthy for the environment. And that's why if I get a chance, to just maybe inform, people about these, because it's not a mainstream fact, people will not admit that, in the mainstream space. So I think, it's time to look into that as a fact.
What about accessories? You're wearing an incredible necklace and earrings and a head. What do you call it? It's a hat. It's a
headpiece. Headpiece. Yeah.
Headpiece. What are accessories coming back?
Well, I like big accessories. I'm a tall woman, so I have a lot of real estate, to cover. So I kind of like, big accessories or hats and stuff like that, gloves, feathers, and I have all these like for years. Like, for instance, I have feathers that I took off of a gown I made, for something like 2008. So I just took it, off. I upcycle a lot of, material. The necklace also, some of the beads, are 15 years old, some stuff I brought from Czech Republic. When I was working in the bank, I had like certain costume jewelry, which was my favorite one. And now I put them, with my with my new, pieces. So I upcycle or recycle material. What was a skirt, like a year ago, it's a blouse. So I really look into material, as like, how far can I go with it, like without, purchasing a new one necessarily. So I just love doing that.
You've had a fascinating career, a fascinating life, and and some of your gowns are extravagant, and I love the fashion shoot extravaganza that you put on and that we reviewed. If people want to check you out, follow you, maybe ask you to design a gown for them, how best can they contact you or follow you?
Well, I don't really do, custom, as I said, I use my fashion, as art, for different pieces, but they can, the different, modalities or different, areas. But if they want to follow me, I have a new Instagram account. My old one got hacked, and finally it's deleted. So it's Marie Kops -official. And they can go, to my website, mariekops.com, where they can also connect, through there.
Really appreciate the story. We're going to take a final break for some messages, and be back with some concluding comments with Marie Kops, a fashion extravagant designer, in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Just back in a minute. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Tonight's topic is fashion. Our guest is Marie Kops. She is a Canadian, Czechoslovakian fashion designer. She's done some unbelievable designs. She's over the years, she's designed things for beauty pageants, for contests, for a fashion extravaganza, a fashion shoot extravaganza that she ran in 2019 that we're hoping she runs again. And she's an artist, and the art behind you, Marie, is that something that you've designed or
yes, I started to do fine art in around 2009. I actually sold, a few paintings in live auctions in Prague. And then I kind of took a pause and I did more of fashion. But what I did is I loved magazines. That's why I did the fashion shoot extravaganza, because I always adored, the fashion, the fashion stories. So what I did is I had stacks of magazines at home. And at some point, my husband was telling me, when are you going to get rid of all these magazines? And I'm like, I'm never going to get rid of those. I need them. I didn't know at that time for what. But then in 2020, I was in Berlin for 3 months. And I came back like really recharged, and I was just like ready to go. And I remember I pulled out all these old magazines, and I started ripping all the pages out and cutting certain words and little things and pieces. And I put together my first collage. And I started another one, but then something else, I was working on, so I had to pause it again. And I remember a year later in 2022, I did finish my second collage exactly on the same day like I did the 2021. And then in March 2022, I attended my first post-COVID event with Peter Triantos was doing some gallery. At his gallery, he was doing some spring mixer NFL or an NFT, or I can't even pronounce that. So I attended, and I was like, oh, that's why these collages. Okay. And so I basically put together all these information I had already in my mind, and I started to put more collages together. And now I am working on an art project, and I am ripping these pages from like 2006 Vogue magazine. And it is just such a passion. It just tickles me. I cannot wait to get up in the morning and start gluing and placing it together. It's just such a passionate project for me right now. And hopefully
this is going to be a show that you're going to put on, or
yeah, I am
art that you're going to sell, or what?
Well, I am planning to exhibit them, and then I have some plan, with combination of some other, other show I did before. So it's a unique concept. Again, I cannot really talk, too many details yet. It's early age or early stage, but it excites me. It's something, I needed a little break, from fashion, and it's something I'm really enjoying, and I can kind of see, where it is going.
So Marie, let me ask you one last question before we go, if we could. You had a traumatic experience as a child, but you always dreamt about being in fashion. If some young lady came to you today and said that she wanted to be a fashion designer, what people were making fun of her, what would you tell her?
Well, it doesn't matter what you want to be. I always say, go for your dream. And sometimes the people in your immediate circle will not support you. So you have to equip yourself, with bravery. You have to be really strong, and you have to shut your ears, off, to those people who say, oh, you can do that. Because there are people who just do not want you to go there. And we have to be aware of that fact. So I would always say, no matter what you want to do in life, go for it. Go for it. Dedicate yourself. Apply yourself fully. Be ready for a lot of obstacles, a lot of uphill battles, but you can achieve, your dream if you work hard enough and you never give up. You cannot give up. It's a no. You cannot give up.
Have you achieved your dreams?
Some of them, yes. I hope there's more.
What's the next dream?
Well, I would really serve, a little bit more. I would really love to help people more, like throughout my art, with my art, maybe with my story. There's something, in me, like a teacher, like a capacity, or maybe like a mentor, where I can coach people a little bit in certain areas, where I had so much experience, that now, because I addressed the trauma and I healed it, I can give people, the hope, that if you are going through this, believe me, you can pull through. Just go through that tunnel, there's the light at the end of it. It's just something, I always was passionate about. People always came to me, for advice before even I knew this. So there is something, I would love to see myself, like encouraging people, giving them hope, or like charging them forward. You know what I mean? Just like being there, the support, they need, because sometimes it's the stranger who gives you kind of like that little hope or that little seed you put into your mind, and it grows, and it's a mustard seed, right? It's a small, tiny seed, but there is something, ignites you inside, and then you go for it. So that is something, I feel like that's maybe my mission in life as well.
Marie Kops, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us your story, your mission, your dream, your fashion. I really appreciate it. It's a very compelling story. I wanted to introduce you all to Marie for a couple of reasons. I think number one, she's an individual, and she's proud of her fashion, and she's proud and excited to be unique and individual and show her self-expression to the world. And she hasn't always been. And that's something that she says it took her 10 years to struggle through before such time as she was comfortable expressing herself in that regard. And that desire to be unique. When everyone's wearing t-shirts and jeans, it's nice to see someone that wants to express themselves uniquely as an individual. Number two, she has had this story of overcoming her childhood trauma. And it was a struggle for her. And the fact that she's done that in such a spectacular way, I think is encouraging to all of us that have had some challenges in life. Number three, she's just really talented. Like this fashion that she's shown us today and in the past is incredible. It's wonderful. It harkens back to the 18th and 19th century. And so it's wonderful that we've got someone in our midst that is showing and developing and sewing such unbelievable fashion. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is her encouragement that we can all do whatever it is that we dream of if we're willing to work hard enough. And that yet, even once we've achieved great things like she has, there's more dreams to come, more she wants to achieve. I think it was someone who said, when you stop dreaming and stop striving, that's when your life becomes boring and old and over. And so keeping those dreams alive is something that's critical in our life. Marie, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
That's our show for tonight. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from the Czech Republic, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Good night, Marie.
Good night. Good night.